Our culture has left Christianity behind. It seeks to form us in its own image. Just like Daniel and his friends, young followers of Jesus must find a new way to embody their faith, one that's faithful to Jesus' teachings and one that is creatively missional towards culture. This is our calling. This is our battle. This is the Daniel generation. Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of the Daniel generation. Today we have Caleb on the podcast. Say hi, Caleb.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Yep, as always. And today we have a bit of an interesting topic. So we've had John Frederick on the show. We've talked a little bit about what discipleship is. Today, we're going to talk about discipleship in today's digital age. Specifically, we're going to talk about your phone, your computer, and the internet in context of discipleship, which is a conversation that I don't think too many people are having. If you listen to the interview with John Frederick, you know that he actually wrote a book on it that you should check out called The HTML of Cruciform Love. I'm definitely going to buy it. It's on my reading list, and that'll give me some good ideas for this conversation as well. But what ought our relationship with technology be as disciples of Jesus? I mean, for me at least, this seemed like an interesting question the first time I thought about it, because it's something that we don't really like to talk about. We just have our faith over here and discipleship over here, and then our devices over here. And it's not like we want to avoid necessarily linking the two, but they're both just so integrated to our lives that it almost just doesn't come up in our minds, you know?
Yeah, and it's a thing that, unlike a lot of things, this is directly related to our generation and after us.
Yeah.
Because we grew up at the beginning of the tech age, well, what I consider the tech age, like internet and all that. And so our whole lives are this. Our parents didn't grow up with it. It's not as big of a deal to them. So that's why for us, it's super important, is because this is our life and there's no way to get away from it.
Yeah.
So you better embrace what you need to do, because you can't just avoid technology. It's not possible. Now you can do things in your life to avoid it, but in general, it's not going anywhere. It's around.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a good point, that it is almost a generational issue to an extent. I mean, obviously our parents have adopted phones and now they're probably just as addicted,
possibly
as we are.
More.
Yeah,
yes.
Maybe more. Yeah, like old folks' homes, they're all playing like Candy Crush, incessantly. But, I think that's kind of the mark of our generation, is that we're always connected to something, whether it's our phone or our computer. We're always on the internet, but we're never present.
Yeah.
Always connected, never present. We're losing that gift of presence with others, because I mean, think about it. When's the last time that you went out with a group of friends and no one brought their phone out the whole dinner and you just talked?
It's actually, oddly, it happens a lot with me.
But you've cultivated that.
Yes, we've come to when my wife and I go out to eat, we purposely do not touch our phones.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a rule we have. And when you don't, the people you're with kind of don't.
Yeah, you kind of set that.
But the second you pull your phone out and start checking it, you realize 4 people pull their phones out.
Oh, totally.
But the second, if you just engage with people, and I talk a lot, so it doesn't give people time to be bored and pull out their phone.
Yeah.
So I kind of force it on people to not get their phones out just by talking.
Well, that's really good, because if you don't, I mean, I'm sure everyone listening knows what it's like when the conversation kind of hits that natural lull. I mean, that's part of human conversation. It just naturally has ups and downs. Well, in our generation, when it hits that downswing, we tend to just pull out our devices, look something up, share memes or whatever. And that's a way of breaking the boredom.
And it's always useless stuff. It's never, I'm going to get on my phone, I'm actually going to look up a statistic that we were talking about or anything like that. It's always get on Facebook and just scroll. You're not even paying attention.
Yeah.
You're just, that little moment of awkward silence is too much for us to handle now.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to our desire for instant gratification that's just been burned into our brains. I mean, and there's research about how apps and social media has been developed to actually perpetuate that.
Absolutely.
It's designed to make you want those notifications and want that instant gratification and all of that. It gives you little hits of dopamine every time you engage with it. So,
and I've mentioned this before, that my friend, I won't mention his name on here, but he's a very intelligent friend of mine. He is he's media guy. He does media production, makes high-end commercials. He doesn't have any notifications on his phone or anything that will send him notifications except for text messages.
Yeah.
No email, no games, of course, nothing, because that dopamine hit you get every time you get a notification is dangerous.
Yeah, it's like,
and he
it's
sees
like
that and only puts it on his iPad, which he doesn't carry around. So when he gets on there, he goes through all his notifications, responds to emails, then gets off.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I wish I could adapt that into my life, but I don't think I have enough, as much discipline as he does to be able to do that. Because I'm like, oh, I need my email right now. Well, no, you don't. You can check your email in 10 minutes on your computer.
Yeah, you won't die, and neither will the
Exactly.
person who sent you an email or a text. Well, so I think that's kind of where the conversation is heading, right? You know, having this episode released maybe like 5 years ago, people would have been like, what? There's no problem here, you know? But now it's starting to surface, and I think we're becoming more aware that we've just allowed all of this tech to float into our lives and take up a huge stakehold in our daily interactions with one another and in how we spend our time. I mean, so I actually did a sort of podcast about this. I went back to a flip phone for about 9 months, and I kind of chronicled my journey and my thoughts in a podcast called 2G, which is actually still on iTunes if you guys want to look it up. But, you know, it was one of those things where the first 2 weeks of going back to that, I had to like detox. It felt like not, you know, not to the same level as I'm sure a drug addiction would be, or even when I kick coffee, that's a lot harder. But there was something in my brain that wanted that itch to be filled. And so I think we're starting to realize this, you know, we're starting to realize it's made us like squirrels with our attention spans. It's, you know, I think the perfect word to describe how it's made us is just distracted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I think that's the point I kind of want to drive home as we kind of go through with this conversation is technology isn't necessarily bad by itself.
No, most things in life are not.
Yeah, but it can become bad depending on how we use it or how we just don't intentionally use it. You know, unintentional use, I think, is really what's causing the problems. Besides the fact that some of the companies creating the social media apps are intentionally developing them in a way that psychologically manipulates us to stay on them longer.
Right. And I find it interesting that we've let something control our lives so much that was created by people that I would never listen to them in like life lessons.
Yeah.
In most of them. There's a few that you can learn really good things from, but the majority of them, it's like, I don't like agree with where they are in life and what they do with their time and their money. So why am I putting all my time into something they've invented?
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, I mean, what is it? It's like 5 billion or 5 million people. No,
There's like 7 million people.
Yeah. On Facebook. I mean,
on Facebook.
It's like 5 billion. It's like so many accounts, which, you know, a lot of them are probably duplicates or fake accounts. But of billions. The user base that's actually active, think about how many of us have just given access to so much of our time, energy, and data to Facebook, right? Just blind trust. And not to say that there's not bad things, but it's designed, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of them are designed to psychologically sway you into spending more time so they can gather more data, so they can give you more curated ads, and the cycle repeats. If you want more ideas and info on that, there's actually a book called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, and it's great. He covers the statistics and the science behind all of that, as well as puts forth an idea of digital minimalism if you're headed towards that and wanting to kind of get away from it. But going forward, I kind of want to just briefly cover at least what I think and what I've analyzed to be the narrative of internet and social media interactions as it goes with our day-to-day lives. So if you think about it, social media is basically beckoning you to put your best face forward and brand yourself. It's to get people to follow you, to make it look like your grass is always greener and your life is more exciting. But the thing is, on the flip side, if you don't have that good of an Instagram feed and you're just following all these people, you're realizing the grass is greener over there and your life isn't that exciting. So you want to look at these people or that thing or this game. And all of that is cultivating desires. And we've talked about the cultivation of desire, but all of that is cultivating a desire for a life you don't have and a life that you likely can't have. And a life I'd be willing to say that those people don't even have.
Absolutely. Because I know a lot of people that post that kind of stuff. And I personally see their lives and go, that's not you at all.
It's so cultivated.
You're never that happy. You're like, because they always make it seem like, life is just amazing. I'm up here in the mountains doing whatever. And you're like, first off, you don't live in the mountains. You don't act like that ever. Like, it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's a fake, it's an advertising world. Like,
Yeah.
it's like we're all advertisers just trying to like sell our image
Yep.
to people that aren't buying.
Well, and it's not selling itself as this, but we've just psychologically picked it up. It's almost like a message of salvation. And so, so social media does that. It says, look at what you could have or be. And if you've cultivated that, it's fake, but you're still going to push it because it puts forward this image of a clean, perfected self, right? Now, on the other hand, there's the anonymous internet, right? Like places like Reddit, or you can create an anonymous account on things like Twitter. And that's different too, because now it's okay to say, read, watch, listen, participate in whatever you want, so long as it doesn't negatively affect others in like a violent way, right? Or I mean, sometimes it even does. But the anonymous internet gives us a place to do whatever we would do that we wouldn't show someone in real life, and just keep it completely in the dark and keep people out of it, and say things that honestly would never be said to someone's face.
Yeah.
So all of it, whether it's the anonymous internet, places like Reddit, or just internet forums with anonymous screen names, or whether it's social media, all of it is basically telling us, it's preaching to us this message that we can escape our limitations and all of the limits of our humanity through a cloud of infinite possibility. So welcome to the internet, where you can put forward whatever face you want. You can make tons of money overnight being a YouTube sensation. You can cultivate a perfect image and sanctify yourself through edited Instagram photos and becoming an influencer. And then you can anonymously purge your dark side by participating in whatever you want without any consequences. And I mean, that might be a little harsh or drastic. Most people probably don't push it to that extent, but that is what it's feeding us in an indirect sense, I think.
Yeah. This kind of made me think of a lot of schools now, especially high schools, but colleges are doing it too. They have these numbers that you can text if you have a complaint or see something happening, and it comes in anonymous to the board of the school or whatever, and they like address the issue. And I understand what they're trying to do with that kind of thing. I mean, and this is a little different, but it still kind of goes about you don't have to be responsible for what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I'm lodging a complaint at someone, and I don't want somebody to know that I complained. Then why are you complaining? Like, the whole hide yourself so nobody knows who's the one saying things is super scary. And in theory, you're like, oh, no, that's good, because then people will say things they wouldn't have. But it's like, that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing to stand up in real life and address the issue, then you shouldn't address the issue. Because we should be doing that. We should be stepping up for people and giving them a face and a person to look at and go, oh, they're opposing me.
Yeah.
Because this whole, I'm being opposed by anonymous people, like, who cares? That's not going to make me stop if I'm bullying someone or doing something. Like, an anonymous tip doesn't do anything. And and that's just another way of hiding who people are.
Yeah. Well, and then on the other side, it becomes the best way to actually destroy somebody.
Absolutely.
And so I think, I mean, it's clear to everybody that there are things on the internet, there are forums, there are certain things that are destructive. There are certain things that are negative, filled with anger, horror, lies. I mean, blatant lies, And then there's the whole almost parody culture of the internet that pushes forward things that they know aren't true, but it's just kind of a joke. I mean, and all of this is just being spedly, it's just like force fed to us down these tubes of social media. I mean, it's just 1,000 miles an hour information overload. And a lot of it isn't honorable. It isn't pure. And Christians are actually called to be the opposite. So I think of Philippians 4:8, which says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, and whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I think about a lot of the time that I used to spend on Reddit. It was not browsing things that would fall into that category unless it was like wholesome memes or like eye bleach, right? Which those subreddits are designed to make you feel better when you've been browsing the internet all day and come into contact with stuff that's just like uncomforting and gross even. So I think that if we're being honest, it's clear that whether it's the anonymous internet or it's social media, the current framework that's given to us that we're just fed and that we've kind of blindly accepted, fully embraced, is destructive to our humanity, and
Mm-hmm.
at the very least has a negative impact on our discipleship to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it has to be that way for Christians. I think that our relationship with technology and social media and the internet should absolutely be impacted by our discipleship to Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this goes back to kind of what I feel like a lot of these episodes are about, which is discipline. And this might be the biggest area. Actually, it's without a doubt the biggest area I struggle with in terms of discipline. And I think that is the core of this issue, is if you don't have discipline, this is going to take over your life.
Yeah.
Social media, news, whatever tech we're talking about, video games, it can be whatever. If you don't have discipline, you're going to be in trouble. And so we need to start setting our disciplines every day. The second you get up, my routine right now, which is horrible, is I get up, I go to the bathroom, and I bring my phone in there.
I did that this morning. Yeah.
And I shouldn't do that. I need to leave my phone out of there for at least like to start, because I'm not just going to go cold turkey on this.
Yeah.
I need to set apart 2 hours in the morning where I'm not engaging with social media, start my day off reading the Bible, getting my mind right. So then when I go and get on Facebook or whatever, which at some point I would love to just completely be done with.
Yep.
When I do go into it, I have my right mindset is already there, and I'm no longer just, my mind isn't just mush by the beginning of the day.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Well, so when I was doing 2G, I really went down the rabbit hole with all this research. And one of the things I read that actually sparked that whole experiment of going back to a flip phone, which I honestly, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I want to go back and stay there, and not just as an experiment, but as a permanent life change.
We should do it. You and me.
I'm down. You want to?
Let's do it right now. Let's say that, well, I'm moving soon, so I don't know if that's a good time to do it because I need my phone
for directions
and all that stuff.
Well,
but
you can actually, so if you get the right flip phone like mine, I had 4G capabilities, and I could hotspot to my computer or my iPad that I'm holding here.
Well, how's this? I will remove all my social media from my phone.
Okay.
And because that'll be the distraction.
Yeah.
The phone itself isn't a distraction to me. It's the social media on the phone.
And we'll actually talk about that in a sec, guys, because that's one of the big things that I've done with my phone that helps. And cool, random, spontaneous.
Let's shake on it.
We're shaking on it right now. We're both going to delete all of those apps from our phone and kind of commit right now to that sort of lifestyle from now on. So you're hearing it now.
Yeah. Wow.
We didn't even talk about that. That just came up randomly.
But it goes along with the thing of, we can talk about discipline all day, but until we actually do it, it doesn't mean anything.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's just like, we got to start knuckling down and doing these things.
Yeah. Well, and so in order to implement an action plan that's rooted in discipleship, we ought to look at who Jesus was, how he lived his life, right? And then take that framework and see if we can contextualize or apply it to our modern life and how that grid would impact our relationship with our devices. I'm kind of stumbling through words because Caleb is showing me. He's literally deleting apps on his phone as we're recording this,
right?
Which is awesome. But I mean, if I think about it, Jesus was present. When he was with somebody, he was with them. He was listening. His attention was devoted to them. And then when he spoke to them, it was absolutely relevant to what they were saying, and it wasn't just spewed off the back burner,
right?
Because he was focused elsewhere. And not only was he present with people, but he was devoted to his mission, which was obviously ultimately the cross, but even, smaller missions of healing and helping people and preaching the gospel of the kingdom. He was attentive, and with people or with whatever task was at hand, he was wholly in attention to that task. Like, he wasn't, okay, well, I'll feed these 5,000, but we also should be thinking about how we're going to do this miracle next week and get, he was where he was. The other thing is, he was slow and was okay with the process. I mean, if you think about it, he didn't start his public ministry until he was 30. So what was he doing until then? He was a carpenter, right? So he was living a normal life, taking care of his family and working and just being a normal Jewish dude in that time. And he was okay with the process. Yeah.
Learning.
Yeah, he was okay with the process of getting to the point where, okay, now I'm ready to do the big thing. And even then, it wasn't like he got baptized and then suddenly, instantly was at the cross doing the big cosmic thing he came to do. It took 3 years of small little things. I mean, not small in the sense,
Yeah, but compared to the cross.
compared to the cross,
Yeah.
yeah. But he had to do all of those small little things and build up his disciples, preach his message, teach them everything he knew, did all sorts of miracles, and all of that eventually got him to where he was going.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're pretty much the opposite. We want it now, we want it big, we want it fast, and our attention is spread in all these different places. And I think if I could describe at least my experience of how I feel when I'm in just hyper technology mode, like when I am so connected, it's just like a fire hose down my throat of all this information, right? I feel anxious. I feel spread thin. I feel not at peace with myself, not whole. You're just being pulled in all these different directions. Jesus was the opposite, right? There's a really good term that I'm going to totally steal from John Mark Comer. He talks about Jesus being a non-anxious presence in his podcast, This Cultural Moment, which you guys should check out. It's really good. A lot of the same sort of content, honestly. But yeah, Jesus was a non-anxious presence. And I think if followers of Jesus need to be anything today, they need to be that non-anxious presence. We need to be the people who are slow and okay with the process, that are okay with the mundane, the people that are so focused and so good at listening that it's honestly shocking to come into contact with because that's so uncommon anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the way to start doing that is to start changing how we interact with technology and setting ourselves apart in that way, right? I mean, I think if there's one word to mark how we ought to interact with technology, it's intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
So are we intentional with our devices? Do we have established purposes that they serve? And furthermore, do we have boundaries implemented to prevent them becoming an overwhelming distraction? What do we do to keep it in check when it goes wrong? And I think all of that goes back to where are our priorities?
Right. Yeah, and a lot of this could be, I mean, I think it'll be very different for each person. Some people, that's accountability people, partners that are like keeping them in check. Like I work from home.
Yeah.
So I'm on my computer all the time. That can become a real big distraction if I start looking at new equipment, right? And then 3 hours later, I'm still looking at equipment and I realize I didn't get any work done. Well, that's a good excuse for me to be like, well, it's educational, right? No. So I need to set these things in order of like, okay, I'm going to work on this for this long a time. Then I'm going to work on this because I can't remove the internet from my computer and because I need it for my work. So I have to get disciplined and start putting these things in order or I will get distracted.
Yeah.
But for other people, they might not get distracted by the internet at all, but they get distracted by their TV or they get distracted by their phone and it's just different for each person.
Yeah. And I think the phone is probably the biggest one, right? Because it's always on your pocket. It has all of that same stuff. Yep. And it's so compact and it always is with you.
And oddly, I'll be on my phone on Facebook in front of my computer where I could be on Facebook. But for some reason, the phone is just like addicting.
Oh, totally. They're crack boxes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good term for it.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good point. So if you're thinking about this in your own life, at least for me, I did this with 2G. I was taking stock and realized I was your average, millennial or Gen Y, whatever. I kind of fall on the cusp as a 95er. They'll put me in the other cat as an iGen or millennial, depending on who you ask. But someone in that age range from, like 18 to 30 right now, you're probably spending, if I can remember the statistic correctly, you're probably spending an average of 3.5 to 5 hours of total time on your phone every day. And so the other shocking part of that statistic, I was like, there's probably a lot of good reasons. They're on the phone, they're texting. No, like 50% or more of that is on social media and games and things like that are honestly a distraction from
I would
anything
put
productive.
it up in the 80s or 90%.
Yeah.
Just looking at my phone, like it doesn't take very long for me to send a text.
Yeah.
And then what am I doing with the rest of the time I'm on my phone? Not doing anything positive.
Yep.
That's it. The only thing I actually need my phone for is texting people and Google.
And calling them occasionally.
Directions.
Yeah.
That's about it. So it's like all that other time is unwasted stuff.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, well, for me, obviously I went down to the flip phone for a while, which was tough because I found myself opening the phone and closing it because I was like, why did I bring this out? I brought it out to distract myself, and then I can't, so I have to put it back. And that was really shameful for the first couple of weeks because you realize how often you do it. Now, so for the same idea, you can actually do something similar on a smartphone without getting rid of your $1,000 device and switching to a flip phone. You don't have to be that drastic, but there are boundaries with a smartphone that you can implement. So for instance, I have a Google Pixel 2, and a couple months back, maybe it was like a half a year ago, Google released their digital wellness app on Android devices. It tracks my total screen time, and it tracks how much that time was spent in each app. I can set timers for apps. So I have Instagram on my phone, and I have a timer on there most of the time. If I'm doing a lot of posting, then I'll change that timer for the week. But I usually set it back to like 15 to 30 minutes a day.
That's about good.
Because I was spending like 2 hours a day on Instagram. Yeah.
It's easy.
And I was spending probably like 3 hours on Chrome. So that was split between Facebook, articles, all that stuff. So I no longer have Chrome on my Pixel, because you can go to apps and then disable an app, even stock apps. So like Chrome comes on a Pixel device. I can disable it. Of course, I can just as easily re-enable it, but that's part of the discipline of it. The other thing is, if you're on an Android device, this is also really helpful. You can set a custom launcher. So basically, when you open your device on Apple or Android, the way that your apps are all displayed is called a launcher. So for Android, we can customize those. And I have one called, I think it's Light Phone or Simple Phone or something like that. And it's great. I can have up to 7 apps on my home screen. It doesn't have notification settings on it. It doesn't have any app icons. It's literally just the app name in black text on a white background. And so I've set those to be like my banking apps, my Google Drive, because I use a lot of that for business, and then maps and podcasts and my Amazon Kindle app, and that's it.
Right.
So if I need to get to Instagram, I actually have to like squeeze my device, get my Google Assistant to come up and say, open Instagram. And just that step makes it to where I open it a little bit less, Yeah,
because how many times do you open an app by reflex? And you're just like scrolling, just push it, and then you realize, oh, I just opened Facebook.
Yeah, why? Yeah.
Why? But then you're there.
Yeah. Well, and you can do a lot of the same things on Apple as well. It's a little bit different, but so when I had an iPhone, I did this. You can set up restrictions, and you just create a restrictions passcode, and then you can actually turn off stock apps like Safari and any of those apps that are distracting. So like maybe it's even the App Store. Like I did that for a while. I had Safari and the App Store disabled, so I couldn't just go download a different internet browser or different apps to distract myself with. And then you can delete all of the distracting apps. And if you have restrictions set up, you can set it where you're not allowed to download those apps without the restrictions passcode being entered.
Yeah, and you give that to like your wife or somebody else.
Yeah.
And so you can't get new apps without them saying you can.
Yeah, pretty much.
That would be great. I'm gonna do that. Because
there you go.
It'll be super tempting to put Facebook right back on my phone.
It's so easy. Well, and I wish the Pixel had that feature, like with Chrome, because I'll be at work, and it's funny. I've got the pattern down. I disable Chrome every off day, and I don't use it. It's like right now I don't have Google Chrome on my phone. Right. But when I'm at work working a 10-hour shift and I'm bored out of my mind on break, I'll be like, well, I'll just look something up real quick and I'll re-enable it. So with your situation, you can get that restrictions passcode and you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. So my cousin called me the other day, randomly out of nowhere. Haven't talked to him in a long time. And he's just trying to get his life, more organized and do things to like get him to his goal. And one of the things he said was getting rid of wasted time. He said he's a TSA agent at a really small airport. He said there's 2 flights a day. That's it. But they're there all day.
Yeah.
So he has like 6 hours of not complete downtime, but definitely downtime. And he said he was sitting there looking around at all the other people, and they were all on their phones for like 2 straight hours.
Yep.
And he realized how much work could he get done in those times. So he brings books now and like studies and does all this stuff. And he said he's able to double dip work and learning instead of it being like, 10 hours of work. Now I have like an hour to do what I want. He can sit there and learn and do all this stuff for that time, and he doesn't ever get on his phone anymore. Yeah. I was like, that's a good way to do it, because like you were just saying, like when you're bored at work, like what else could you be doing instead of pulling out Google? Like you could be listening to, I don't know, books on tape or like whatever.
Or this podcast.
Yeah. Or you could be studying something. Whatever it is, you could be doing that. Now, I know you do that on Google a lot, forums and learning about your new drone stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But how much of that is actually that and how much of it is just wasted?
Is wasted time. Well, and so that's something I've been trying because my job's the same way. There's a lot of downtime on slow days. And so I'll instead of, just mindlessly spending time on the internet, I've actually, so like I said, I try to keep it disabled, and I'm doing a lot better at that since I've, learned I could even disable a stock app like that. And now what I do is I listen to audiobooks. I finished probably 4 audiobooks in the past month that are all like 8 hours long, and mostly at work and then on the commute to and from work.
Sure.
And then I listen to podcasts, and when I'm on break and I can, devote my attention to a screen because I work at a job where I should be paying attention to what's going on, and it's a transportation job. So if I'm distracted, someone could get hurt. So
sure.
But when I'm on break, I used to just mindlessly scroll, and now I can do that with my Amazon Kindle app, right? And then I'm reading a book,
right?
And that's totally different than me,
sure,
reading stupid articles, So so that's what I've done. It sounds like that's what your cousin has done, but those are just boundaries based on what we've determined are unhealthy technological habits.
Yeah.
And those help us create a healthier relationship to tech and a more productive one, right?
Yeah. So as a Christian, how can we use this for good? And because we've talked about good as in like what's healthy just as a human.
Yeah.
But what is healthy as in our walk with Jesus with technology? Because I personally see very, very little benefit of technology.
Yeah.
With my walk with Jesus. Very little to none. And some people that, audio Bibles, things like that, okay, but I don't really associate that the same. So where can we draw the line, and how can we use technology in a way that is beneficial to our walk with Jesus?
That's a good question.
And I don't think either of us have an answer. We can
I've thought about it because, on one sense, it's a platform where anyone can have a voice, and we all get to project who we are out there. And the distinguishing factor is whether or not we're honest.
Sure.
And I think that's huge. There are tons of church Instagrams and Jesus quotes Instagram pages and Facebook pages, and some of them are cheesy, like this and this kid goes to heaven or something. And that's just stupid,
my gosh,
right? But
it makes me mad.
But there are some people that put out really good content and have social media blurbs that are useful and helpful.
Sure.
I think for me, I was actually going to delete my Instagram until I started pushing for this podcast and trying to advertise it. And I think that's a healthy use, right? I'm using it as a platform to send people to content that's going to be more formative than just Instagram would be. So I think that's part of the answer I've formulated, is using it as a way to kind of spread the gospel intentionally and creatively, though, not just posting pictures of Jesus,
right,
everywhere. Because then only Christians are going to follow you, and then we're all distracted with something that's arguably good, but not necessarily the healthiest. I don't know.
Now, the one thing that I would point out, and the thing that even people like Francis Chan, Matt Chandler, you would know many more. Those people that you just know as an online presence, you watch their sermons or whatever. How much more beneficial would it be to actually go to those people in person?
Oh, 100%.
And learn from them? And you can be like, listening to Francis Chan stuff is like great online and everything, but we're missing the personal connection. Yeah. And that is one thing that, a lot of them tell you that. I know Matt Chandler does at the beginning of every one of his sermons. He said, do not supplement this as your Sunday service. He said, this should just be, or it should be not, maybe I'm mixing up my words here. It needs to help you along your way, but it shouldn't take place of you going to your church.
Be the bedrock.
And the bedrock. Exactly. That's a healthy way to view it. But how many of us just watch sermons online and don't have any interaction with the leaders in our churches?
Yes.
And that's super dangerous. And it's it's a good thing that we've started to it started to pull us away from a personal relationship, which is actually more important. Yeah. The knowledge is nothing without the relationship.
Yes. Well, and that goes back to the whole thing. And so that book, Digital Minimalism, talks about this, that because we tend to do what's easier just as humans, we as a culture are starting to supplement real connection for online
Absolutely.
connection, and it's not the same. It's so much cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much less complex. Even talking with someone on the phone. So like this morning, I had a great conversation with one of my friends from back in Phoenix, where I
Mm-hmm.
moved from, and we talked for a half hour, and that was real human connection because I hear his voice. It's live. It's immediate responsiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting immediate feedback on what you're saying, and it's engaging, and the conversation moves and flows more freely than anything online because you can cultivate it, you can spin it and
Absolutely.
twist
And
it.
if you missay something, you can rephrase it, and
Yeah,
nobody like sits there and goes, "But you said this,"
exactly.
or whatever.
Well, and then he and I mean, we've cultivated a friendship that's going to be long lasting, even though now we're 9 hours away from each other because we
Mm-hmm.
call each other every so often and we text here and there. So there's ways to do that and use technology in a healthy way. But again, you're never, ever going to be able to replace face to face conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, again, kind of back to what we said earlier. That is something I think we need to become experts at as disciples
Mm-hmm.
because going forward, people aren't going to come to Jesus because we have better Instagram feeds. They're
Oh.
going to come to Jesus because we're the people that actually listened to them, actually walked through their struggles with them, and actually spent time with them in person and gave freely of ourselves for them in that moment and weren't distracted by what we could be doing for ourselves to build a better brand.
Mm-hmm. And when was the last time you had a conversation and truly listened to what the other person was saying? You know how
Yeah.
easy it is to kind of listen, and then your response to their question wasn't great because you actually weren't really paying attention. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's most of my conversations if you really think about it.
Yeah.
But I heard it from somebody, I can't remember who it was, but it was about like becoming a better like business person, and it was learn to listen to what they're actually saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so true. When people are talking, you just like aren't paying attention. It's like, man,
Yeah.
and you totally miss that. You completely miss it when you're typing online. There's like,
Yeah.
because you just kind of browse through what they said. And you're like, well, I just disagree. But
Yeah.
in actual person, we're sitting here talking. You'll be saying something, then I'll like look over and grab something. And like, am I really listening to what you're saying?
Mhm.
I'm getting the gist of it, but I need to actually focus on what you're saying
Yeah.
and what other people are saying. And that's what makes a really good interviewer, or even like some good politicians are that way, because you ask them a question and they respond directly to your question.
Man, those are far and few in
Oh,
between.
very, very.
Yeah.
But it makes you such a great person to be around because people love talking to you
Yeah.
because you actually are listening to what they're saying. Even if you think it's meaningless, doesn't matter. They
Yeah.
deserve to be heard because they're a person.
Yeah.
And we need to give them the time and our energy to pay attention to what they're talking about. Even if I disagree completely, it doesn't matter. They deserve that. They're a human.
Yeah.
Their opinion matters.
That gives them a sense of dignity that we all have as image bearers. We're
Mhm.
created in the image of God. We have that dignity. And that's such a universal human desire to be heard and to be understood
Yeah.
and to be loved, right? And even if you disagree with the entirety of their content, you can it's an act of agape love to sit there with that person and hear them out. And then not
Mhm.
just be like, well, here's how you fix your problem. Bye.
Yeah.
Or here's what we do more, I think. We all have this innate desire to be heard and loved and listened to. So when people don't listen to us well, we just shout over them louder, whether it's
Mhm.
online or, through some other form. And I think that, again, is an unhealthy, unproductive, destructive form of communication. And we're kind of starting to see the fruit of that, I think, in our culture at large. But
Mhm.
I mean, that's the key. I think as Christians going forward, if we can't do those things in person, then we're going to have a much harder time actually being missional. But if we can, we're going to be unique because everyone else is looking at the cutting edge of what's next, what's new, how can we connect, how can we be faster, quicker, better, more efficient, more engaged, more productive. And they're enslaved to this idea of technology as savior almost, right? It's going to
Mhm.
let us transcend our limitations. If we can take a step back and think through, because again, Caleb and I don't have an answer to this, but if we can think through how to use technology as a beneficial tool for the kingdom and keep it there, just keep it as a tool for
Mhm.
our own lives, like email is a tool that helps me get business done, and that's
Sure.
it. It can also be a tool for the kingdom And we have to talk about and figure out how to get that done. But that's it. That's where it should end. And then on the other side, we need to reclaim conversation. We need to reclaim presence and process and all of those things that we talked about. And I think if we can do that, that's going to be a model of hope for people who are already becoming exhausted with the endless fury of information at their fingertips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing because none of us actually want to knuckle down and do what's right when it comes to technology.
Yeah.
We want the newest this, the newest that. Even if it's not the newest, we just want something else that'll help us become better Christians. But that's not how it should work. We should use that as like you said, a tool. But if that comes between me and Jesus, then I'm missing the whole point.
Yeah. Well, and along those lines, I even think of content creators because we've been mostly focusing on people who are consuming content.
Sure.
Right. And content creators, I think, have the same charge of, is what you're creating actually for the benefit of who's consuming it? Or is it so that you can boost your platform and boost your image and your brand? And I think there's a difference there. There's a lot of content that's designed to get people to pay attention to your brand for the sole reason of lifting yourself up, of lifting your brand up. But I mean, and even people who aren't Christian will say this: if your content isn't for the consumer, if it's not to benefit whoever's consuming it, it's inherently oppressive, honestly, if you think about it, because you're just utilizing their attention to distract them from whatever they could be doing to live a meaningful life for your own gain.
Yeah.
Conversely, I think Christians should be the best YouTubers. We should be the best podcasters. We should have the most prolific portfolios of beautiful photography, and we should really recultivate these streams as a means of artistic excellence. I mean, if you look throughout church history, most of the best art, the most revered statues and paintings and works of literature were Christian, almost directly, almost every time. And if not, they were directly influenced by a Christian vision of life. If we can take that same thing and then apply it to the content we're creating, not only is it going to be for the person listening to this podcast or maybe the YouTube video or whatever, but it's going to be a benchmark of beauty that stands apart from people trying to co-opt beauty and co-opt content as a means of self-glorification, right? And I think that's what you see. You see a lot of people who get really good at taking photos and really good at editing them. And they just post tons of photos and you go, oh, that's cool. And you follow it. And then they use it as a way to monetize themselves, to build themselves up. But do they actually care about the people that are buying their photography or listening to their podcast? If they don't, then it's just that same cycle of self-edification that's honestly destructive because you can't even live up to the own image that you've created of yourself at some point. I mean, that's my intention for this podcast. I don't care if anyone follows me on Instagram because of this podcast. I mean, I tell people every episode to share it, right? Because I want more people to listen to it because I think I'm creating something that's important for the people listening to it.
Right.
And same way, if I make a YouTube video that's like a video essay or just some creative short film, it ought to be something that's for the benefit of whoever's consuming it, not just for my resume or my benefit as a creator. And you can almost create the same product with both of those motivations, but the end result of what it does to you and what it does to people is going to be vastly different based on your intention.
Yeah, that's being very intentional about what you're doing. And we've talked about that before, not even just in this area, but in every area of our life, we need to be intentional.
Yeah.
We need to be very intentional about reading our Bible. We need to be very intentional about the people we interact with and how we talk to them. And it's no different in this area. Everything you do needs to be intentional. And not only will you become more successful as a person, because the people that are more intentional about what they do aren't wasting time, but you will also it'll be more beneficial to the kingdom and to people because you are intentionally reaching into their lives and doing things for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that about sums it up. So just to kind of summarize, we need to, as Christians, start thinking about how following Jesus ought to impact our relationship with technology. How can we trim the fat? How can we get rid of the ways that it's leading us astray, that it's distracting us, that it's cultivating unhealthy attitudes and unhealthy habits? What can we implement as boundaries with tech to be healthier as people, but also more effective as disciples? How can we use it as a tool to further the kingdom and create honest to God, beautiful content, beautiful creations that move people and aren't just for building ourselves up? How can we stand against the narrative of culture to build our brand, to self-glorify, and to participate in this cycle of consumeristic digital materialism? How can we counteract that as disciples? And how can we be more present in our lives? Putting technology aside, how can we be a force for presence, for process, for listening closely to people, for engaging with them in real life, in front of them, face to face? Those are all things that I think we should challenge ourselves at getting better at. I want to close though, just with a few ideas. If you're listening to this and you're at all convicted about your interactions with technology, if you realize through this or maybe through a ton of content that's coming out recently that's on the same topic that you have a problem with your phone, I want to give you just a few tools that have helped me a little bit that I'm still utilizing every day to, impact my journey towards a more holistic technological relationship. So the first one we talked about in detail, and that's boundaries. Determine what you're using the most to distract yourself or what's the most unhealthy part of your relationship with technology and get rid of it. If that means setting up restrictions and blocking Safari or deleting certain social media apps or fasting from those things, then do it. Utilize only the apps you need for work and for communication with the people that are most important in your life. You don't need 1,000 friends on Facebook. You only need about 30 deep relationships in your life. That's about all you can psychologically handle. So focus on building those and in being really connected to people that actually matter and doing your work in a way that's actually effective, and only have apps that impact and help you with those goals. Now, the next thing is make a point to do things in real life without your phone, which, I mean, everyone's just like audible gasp, right? You can leave your phone behind for that coffee shop trip with a friend. You can leave your phone behind at dinner. You can turn it off. You can set it in your bag. Just that small amount of distance actually creates a small barrier that'll stop you from just instinctively picking it up. I mean, even when you get home, you can set it in a tray somewhere and not have that distraction.
Yeah, and how a part of that, and people always think, well, but what if there's an emergency? Was like, we were fine for how many years?
For all of human history.
Until now, without our phones right by our side all the time. It's okay.
Yeah.
Now if your wife is on a trip at the moment, then maybe not. Yeah. But that would be like the one scenario. Like, I know she's at work at the school. I don't need my phone. She's not going to be calling me.
Yeah.
And that's about the only person that needs to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
So why do I have my phone all the time? Like,
yeah,
currently it's fine where it's at. But yeah, if I do go out to eat, or if I go to the movie theater, yeah, I'm going to turn it off because I'm not going to check it anyway.
Yeah.
So why have that distraction of it in my pocket?
Yes.
Things like that. But
well, because if it's always on, honestly, they put an extra step into turning your phone off, and now none of us turn it off. If you notice that, we talk about that extra step to stop you from doing something.
Right.
All of our phones now take 2 steps to turn off. You have to hold the button and then slide the lock, right? Well, that psychologically makes you less inclined to turn it off ever. The question is, at the base of that whole practice, do you need instant access to everybody at all moments? Or maybe to frame it like this, does everybody need instant access to you at all moments? Maybe your wife does, if you have one, maybe your close friends or your family. But even then, is there anything that if you have your phone off for a couple hours even, is there anything that can't wait just that amount of time? I would say probably not, depending on where you are and what you're doing, So that's one, just having those healthy boundaries. That's just for you as a person and as a disciple to have a healthy place that you can start to grow on those other things we talked about. And then we mentioned fasting, not just in like a sense from food or anything like that, but actually from your devices. And then these last 4 are huge. I'll start with exercise. For me, and I'm not anyone to preach on this because I don't exercise that consistently. Like, I ride my bike places, I ski here and there, but I found that the best way to start to detox, so to say, from this addiction to distraction is actually to exercise, because it gets your blood moving, it gets you fully engaged in that moment in like a primal sense, where you're focused on the run or on lifting or whatever you're doing. So that's one way to help. And that, again, is more just for you as a human. But then these 3, I think, for me at least, when I went to my flip phone, and even now I try to do them as regularly as possible, they're almost a resistance to this culture of distraction and endless productivity and image building. And that's they're all rooted in prayer of some sort. So the first one is just direct prayer, talking to God, listening to God, and it can be spontaneous or structured. I do morning prayer every morning if I can. I do some psalm reading throughout the day, and then obviously I pray sort of spontaneously with God. Another one is contemplation. And so this is more of the idea of there's a concept about God or discipleship or the Christian walk, or maybe a verse that I'm just going to sit for an extended period of time and sort of meditate on that. So, maybe it's the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And you can just meditate on that and just sit with it and let it brew in your heart for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe 10 or 5 to start. And again, that kind of moves into breath prayer. You can pray some of these things and interact with your breath, and that integrates your body into it, which again is a resistance to distraction and just your mind fleeting from you towards these things, right? So the classic one is the Jesus prayer, which is, "O Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And so you breathe in for the first half, breathe out for the second, right? And then again, that moves even further into the idea of silence as a discipline. Can you sit in a room with no distraction, no TV, no music, nothing happening in front of you for 15 minutes and just be quiet with God? I think if you start cultivating some of those habits, I try to, again, it's not very regular, not as regular as I'd like it to be, and that's something I'm working on. I'm just starting out slow and starting to integrate them more and more. But those things are an active resistance to the way that technology tries to just fire hose information down our throats and keep us always connected, and it stresses us out. So these things will help counterform you in ways that are healthy not only for you as a human, but will actually teach you to be a better disciple and empower you to do some of those other things we talked about, like be present with people and listen and be involved in their lives.
And a big part of that, especially like the meditation and like being silent and all that, that requires you to either have your phone completely off
Hmm.
or in a very far room.
Yeah.
Because that buzz that you hear and you're like, oh, I'll just ignore
Man.
it. Nope, you've lost. Like the point is that there's nothing to distract you.
Absolutely.
And if you're ever having a conversation with somebody and you feel a buzz in your pocket, well, don't check your phone.
Yeah.
Like you're engaged with the person. Don't be distracted. That'll help you not be distracted when it's away from you.
Yeah.
And then when it is near you and it does make a noise when you're interacting with someone or whatever it is, or reading your Bible and your phone rings, like you just ignore it.
Uh-huh.
But that only comes from getting it out of your life in those
Absolutely.
areas. But for sure.
Well, and so we'll leave with that. And that's my challenge for you guys if you've heard this episode. Think and reflect upon your relationship with technology through the lens of your discipleship to Jesus. What changes do you need to make? Write them down on paper and start to implement them slowly. If you need to have someone hold you accountable or someone do that with you, do that. That would be great. It helps a ton.
And just do things that seem dorky. Put a sticky note on your phone when you go to bed.
Yeah.
That says do not check until 9 a.m. or whatever your
Yeah.
routine is. Like these things that you just go, oh yeah, because you're going to forget.
Oh, totally.
The second you wake up
Like
in the morning,
week
you're going to go
2,
back to your
yeah.
routine. You're going to pick up your phone. You're going to start checking it.
Mhm.
Well, put a thing there that says do not check until later or whatever.
Yeah.
Or stop using it as an alarm.
Yeah.
Keep it out of the room.
That's
at
a huge
night.
one that I've done.
Just get an actual alarm clock.
Mm-hmm. They're like
Just
$12.
little things like that that just help you get out of this routine that we're all stuck in. We're in this huge rut.
Yeah.
It's like a canyon at this point.
Yeah.
And getting out of that is hard.
Mhm.
So you got to do the little things that'll get you there.
And just the thing is, if you just keep going, and even on the days where you forget, just the next day, just don't worry too much about messing up one day or forgetting one day.
Mm-hmm.
Just little by little, day by day, and then everything's different. So if today was just a little bit better than yesterday, if I was a little more intentional than yesterday, and I keep building upon that and just that small momentum, eventually you'll be in a completely different place, and you'll look back with awe and wonder at what God has done in your life. And if all of that sounds scary, if all of that is like, man, that's a lot to process, I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit, at least do this. When you turn this podcast off and you have another free moment, whether it's right now or if it has to be after work or after whatever you're doing when you're listening, just take 15 minutes and turn it off and just sit in silence with God. Just take 15 minutes with no distractions, no social media, no TV, no music, no people to talk to. Find a quiet place and just rest in the presence of Jesus. And I think if you can do that, I think you'll find yourself so oddly refreshed by it that that will give you a new motivation to pursue a more healthy relationship with technology and a more intentional lifestyle towards engaging people in real life. And that's all we have for you guys. If you do one of those things, if you maybe fast from your phone or integrate some new boundaries or are trying out some new disciplines, let us know. Send us an
Mm-hmm.
email. As always, the email is in the description for you guys to interact with us and let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask any questions and just engage with us in a more personal way. So keep sending those emails. We read all of them and it helps shape this podcast. So thank you guys for doing that. And again, as always, if you're benefiting from this or you think someone could, please leave a good review on iTunes or wherever you're listening because that helps boost us since we are a new podcast and get this message out to more people. And also, just tell a friend. I mean, if there's someone that is talking about these things or maybe could benefit from them, just let them know. We'd love to have them interact with us as well. Because again, we're all in this together as disciples, and we want the next generation of disciples to be fully sold out to Jesus and creatively missional towards culture. And we can't do that without you guys. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Daniel Generation.